situation where you have to do a double move, have to move in mom's garage for a minute,
Oh, hell no.
right? Welcome to the Opposites Unite podcast.
Where we discuss real estate and lifestyle topics,
Break barriers,
build connections,
and find common ground.
Let's unite. So one of the most common questions I get asked is, how am I going to sell my home and buy a home at the same time?
Right. So what are the common fears of somebody that's in that scenario that wants to sell their house? And move, right? And wants to find a new place. So what would be a common fear that they're,
The most common one I hear is, am I going to end up homeless? Am I going to have to do a double move? What if I don't find the perfect house or what if I find my house and I don't have a buyer? Or in reverse, what if I have a buyer and I don't find my perfect house?
That's not a good thing, right? you essentially don't have a place to live because you sold your house and you didn't find the new one, right? That's the concern.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would always recommend is put your house in the market, because this is the thing. People are always afraid that they're going to find the buyer and sell their house. But there's a process to putting the house on the market.
For sure.
Takes time, right?
Right. But doesn't it seem, to most consumers, it seems backwards. And I see what they're saying, for sure. But the process is put your house on the market, find a buyer, then go find the house. Right?
Well, this is the key.
Mm-hmm.
If you put your house on the market, you have to disclose that you have what's called a home of choice contingency.
Okay.
Meaning you're not going to sell your house until you close on your new house, right? So you always have that way of backing out of selling your house, but you have to be upfront in telling your buyer that. Now, it is a thing, because if a buyer comes and he's waiting for you to find a home,
Mm-hmm.
he's only going to wait so long. So the key to putting your house on the market, getting it ready to sell, being at market in a good position because your house is all set up, the marketing's done fantastic, and now you're going out shopping for homes. Now that's the other part that people don't ever really consider, is what does that look like when you're out shopping?
Well, let's back up for a second. The whole reason we go through the process in this order is to put that person, or put that client of ours in a good position on their purchase, right? So let's go there. If you let's say you do it backwards. Let's say you go out shopping, you go to open houses, you go start looking at properties, and you find that home, that is just the one, right? But you haven't put your house on the market yet. You don't have a buyer yet. That's going to put you in the weakest position possible. So it's also not impossible, right? Because
Right.
we could always...
Well, if you get lucky and nobody's there competing with you.
Well, true, if you don't have competition. But there are other things you could do. Like you could source a bridge loan, or if you've got savings or investments, you could cash out. And you'd have to be able to qualify for both homes at the same time temporarily.
You cash out a 401k, you're going to get penalties.
Yeah.
And that's never the ideal way to do it. Yeah, there's different ways to do it. All of those add costs. Ideally,
True.
the way you want to do it is you want to list your property, get it on the market, find a buyer.
Yes.
Lock them in, simultaneously out looking for property, and weaving through the available inventory, and just being on it, depending on how hot the market is, right? Because if it's hot, then it makes it even more complicated. And if it's low inventory like we are now, then that can be complicated.
Yeah.
So being ready, you tell your buyer. If you lose your buyer because you couldn't find a property, hey, you still have a place to call home. So at the end of the day, it's a process, but that's what we do, right?
It's a juggle for sure.
Yeah.
And it is. We do this every day. It's not uncommon for us to do this process, right? But I can see it from the consumer side, right? From our seller / buyer side. that it's a lot to juggle. It's a big juggle for sure.
Yeah, and if they don't know that they're being protected and things are in place, and there's a lot of emotion, right? Because you're moving, you're relocating, whether it's around the corner, usually you're moving because it's an upgrade, downgrade, whatever you're doing, relocation for work, whatever it is, it's emotional. And you're uprooting, taking all your daily routines and putting them in boxes,
Yeah.
and then now you're doing that. So it gets very emotional, and people, if it's not done correctly, it gets very stressful.
Oh my gosh, it can be a disaster if it's not done correctly.
Right. So
I have to say one thing. We have never made anyone homeless, right?
no.
And don't ever plan to, because we keep the proper contingencies in place to protect our clients.
Unhoused.
Yes, unhoused.
So
sorry.
if
But I want to tell you also, I've seen it done poorly, right? We had a buyer recently, and we were not selling their home, the home that they were living in. They were the tenants. And, we didn't have the listing on that particular one.
I remember. I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, not saying names, but, we weren't the listing agent on the home that they were living in that was being sold. We were helping them with their purchase. Right.
Right.
And the realtor on the listing side did not put the proper protections in place for this family.
Right.
And I mean, we just made it like by the skin of our teeth.
It was like 2 days, right? They were like,
Oh no,
on
there
the
there
wire.
there was actually about like an evening where they really should have been out,
yeah.
and they weren't out until the following
Right.
morning.
I remember those
Yeah.
calls. And that was stressful.
That was
And it
stressful for me. That was stressful for them, because I mean, I was freaking out because there was nothing that you or I could have done to help them at that point, because we were not in control on the other side.
One thing I will say is that agent on that was selling the home that they were living in, right?
Yeah.
Was a poor communicator.
Oh yeah.
And made it very egotistical. Everything was very egotistical. Made it about her, not about the client, right? And
It was
not
sad.
about the tenants. And she made it all about her, and it was not a cool thing to do.
No.
And you know what, things happen in this business that make it tough to, you have to be composed. You're the professional, and you have to keep the cool, because you are managing a lot of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't be the one that's emotional,
No. Gosh, no.
so I think in that case, that agent lost her cool, and it was not cool, because at the end she put our clients in a place where they were stressed, and it just added so much stress to the situation. It's unnecessary, and our real goal is just to make it easy and convenient for people to go through this process. It's already stressful enough.
100%. Yep. 100%.
Inherently, without, it's a perfect scenario, it's already stressful, right? Like the whole thing I talked about, uprooting and everything. So yeah, but what's another common fear that people would have? Obviously, in houses is a concern.
Mm-hmm.
One thing is, am I going to be able to get the maximum for my house, right? Like
That's every seller's concern.
yeah, but that's
Not just this situation.
But how does that get impacted by poor planning? Like, let's say you find the house that you love, you haven't marketed your house.
Right.
Now you're scrambling to market it.
To try to find a great buyer.
Right. And you're going out there hat in hand trying to find like anybody you can. Now, it's somewhat of a desperate situation, right?
And those buyers smell that
Yeah.
fear.
I mean,
Unfortunately, if they know, and it's not even that, you're trying to let them know and ruin your client's position per se, but, in some cases, and we do actually have one of those cases right now where the client jumped the gun, went out and saw open house,
And,
had to
yeah.
have it, just had to have it. And great, we want them to have their dream home.
yeah.
But
And they're great people, you know what I mean? And that's the whole
God,
thing.
I know. And and at the end of the day, right? Like, I mean, now that property that they have for sale, I mean, we're dropping the price because they want to sell it fast now.
Right.
Whereas
Right.
if they would have maybe slowed down, taken our advice a little bit.
It's tough, but they found their home, their dream home.
I know.
So that's
I get
the
it.
thing. So ideally, you want to do it in that order, right? And that's why, because of that reason specifically. Now, and not to mention the fact that you're going out into the market with your house not marketed. Now, the buyer is the seller of the property that you're wanting to buy is looking at your offer like you don't have your house on the market. If there's competition, you're going to lose. So that's frustrating, right? To make an offer and be shot down, and because of that. So that in this case, the negotiations were on point, right? Because you did a great job, and that was.
I think we beat out about 5 offers in that situation.
It's also expensive, right? I mean, realistically, you have to present a probably a stronger offer than you would if you had cash in the bank. Like, that's ideal, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a property to sell, but even if you have a loan, that's the next step, right? And then the next tier up in terms of strong qualifications, right? Sometimes cash isn't king, but usually it is. All right, so and that's what I'm thinking is like, get your house on the market, get it sold, make sure you have your contingencies in place.
Yeah.
Sometimes what we do even is we'll, like, if you can't close on that property out there, we can even buy you more time in your current home even after you sell it.
Oh yeah,
That's
do a rent back
option too.
for
Yeah,
sure.
right. So these are all tools that we can use to protect you from not getting in a situation where you have to do a double move, have to move in mom's garage for a minute.
Oh hell no.
Right? Or like, move into a hotel, temporary. That happens, that people go to these temporary extended stay kind of types of scenarios.
Sure.
Because some people do really, I've ran into scenarios where people needed the cash out, not to buy another property, but they just needed the cash out. So they just wanted to liquidate. They go to extended stay just because it's such a quick thing. But yeah, you don't want to do that. Ideally, you want to plan. You want to take the right steps, work with the right people to get it done right, so that it's smooth as possible.
As smooth as possible, right? Yeah. Navigating these tricky waters, but it definitely can be done. It just takes a little bit of flexibility on everyone's part, I would say, because timelines are moving around. Even if it goes perfectly, you put your house on the market, you find your buyer. In that time frame that you have to go find a house, you find the perfect house. At that point, we're renegotiating all the dates because we've got to accommodate multiple families. And don't forget too, that's only with two concurrent transaction. I can't talk right now.
One right after the other.
Yeah,
like one
concurrent transactions. But what if you've got 3 or 4 legs of the transaction?
Right,
been there.
Yeah, exactly. And those are tough. Again, another person that the last one I remember, the lender on the first house, right? So they were the buyer. We were the middle, right? So the lender was holding off, or was not communicating and not explaining what was going on, which made my seller of his property, right, my listing, he was moving out of state, and made it near impossible for us to know what was going on because the lender that was supposed to buy his house wasn't communicating. So it made everybody stressed out, and just communication is such a key in this business. It's so important.
Absolutely.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Tough when people don't communicate.
Well, we cannot control others.
I know.
Right.
We wish we could, but
just ourselves.
Oh, you have pressure. That's why you do the paperwork. You put the paperwork in place also.
Yeah.
And you do the contingencies, and you do the deadlines, and you do all of it. So if worst case scenario, they opt not to, and you wind up in a place where people are ghosting you or something like that, you can turn the screws a little bit, right? You can start doing ways to prepare for cancellation, which is a means of turning the screws a little bit, right? A little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
A little bit of pressure, because people get, As they say, pressure makes diamonds. So you don't want, if you're protecting your client and you're doing what you need to do to get them where they need to go, you have to have the tools to apply pressure.
Yep.
And that if you didn't do that at the beginning and you didn't plan that properly, you probably can't. Right?
That's
yeah.
where good contract knowledge and negotiation skills come in, right?
Yes, especially
You
because
got to have it locked down from the beginning.
I used to stare at contracts because, I mean, what are they, like 13 or 15 pages, right? So, like, you just glaze over on all the details of everything. And after the years, I mean, you just kind of know where everything is.
Yep.
And, they keep switching it around, right? Because it's a...
Oh, yeah. They change those forms on us constantly.
Yeah.
Right when you think you know it, like the back of your hand, there's an updated form. Yeah.
It's usually because something legal happened that caused it to have to change. But so the key is to stay up to date on what's going on in those contracts, and then you can navigate them better.
Yeah.
Getting continuing education, right?
Yep.
So that you stay up to date on what the latest and greatest is.
Yeah.
Or what to do or what not to do, because some practices, which are best practices today, if things change, the waters change, you have to be able to adapt.
Yep. I want to tell you a funny story. My very first real estate sale, my client was an electrical engineer.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Very, very type A, dotted every I, crossed every T, very analytical. And you know what? I wasn't happy about it at the time, but it made me better because I had to know that contract inside and out on my very first transaction.
Wow.
It's a little scary. He was a little intimidating because he read everything and he made me explain it to him. So I was like, oh, okay.
Well, so you guys were kind of learning together in a sense. Yeah.
Unfortunately, but
nobody wants to learn on the to drive while on the road, right?
I don't think he knew that he was my first transaction, but we won't tell him.
Well, it sounds like you got it done.
Of course, yeah. I did a good job, I think.
That's good.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these things are put in place to protect everybody, and being able to work with people that help you at the beginning, that's key. And that's almost the most difficult part of being like a seller or a buyer. That obviously, a seller, you've bought before, but if you're a buyer, you've never bought before, so you don't know how to navigate this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting off topic into
a little bit, getting in the weeds.
The part about us working with this, being a seller that's concerned about being unhoused and being, having to avoid unnecessary expenses, unnecessary delays, working with people that communicate, that make a transaction smooth and easy, as possible. I want to make sure and put that in possible. There because, I mean, the idea of moving across the country yourself, I don't care if you don't have a house and you're just packing it up and going, is already nerve-wracking in itself. And then you have to take into, all these other moving parts. If you don't work with the right person, it just can be.
Absolutely. And every situation it's a custom situation, right? So when a client brings their particular family needs to us, we look at all the aspects, and it's like piecing together that perfect puzzle to see, how it's going to go down for them and how we're going to get their family out of their current home and into their new one.
Right. That's a challenge. I definitely like a curveball, right? Within a transaction. But we do it
every day.
Thanks for tuning into the Opposites Unite podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to leave a comment for a chance to get a shout out in our next video. See you next time.